I recently got a new job, so I figured I'd do something a little bit different today and tell you what I do, how I got this job, and take you through what I do in a day. So I feel like saying I have a new job is a little bit misleading because I'm actually at the same company. I just switched roles internally from strategy and ops to product marketing. And I think making an internal pivot is one of the best ways to switch jobs without really switching jobs because you don't have a big gap on your resume, you don't have to adapt to a new company, and it's such a cool way to try something else while already knowing the lay of the land, and it's just a less scary switch. So I have to take you back to last year. I graduated from business school and started a new job in strategy and ops at a B2B software company, which just means that we sell software to other businesses. And in the strategy and ops role, we were a really small team working with the CEO on strategic projects. From the beginning in that strategy and ops role, it was kind of a rotational program, which is why I chose it. So the idea was that you would work with a bunch of different divisions and ultimately find something that you would work in more permanently. I worked a lot with product marketing. I was also really interested in the role, so that's why I ended up switching into that role. And so what is product marketing? I feel like I have a hard time answering this question. I actually jotted down a bunch of notes because I feel like it's one of those roles that's a little bit different at every company, and it's a little bit harder to explain than, say, sales or marketing. But in a nutshell, product marketing is responsible for bringing products to market, positioning the products effectively, and enabling sales and marketing to then go distribute that product. You'll often also hear the terms go-to-market strategy or product strategy. I think those are very synonymous with what product marketing does. And so within an organization, product marketing usually sits within marketing, but I've also seen product marketing report to product, which is the case in my org. And you usually find a head of product marketing and people under him or her who correspond to certain products and are really the go-to person within the org for that product. And as a product marketing manager, you work very closely with product managers who are the ones building the product, marketing, sales, and sometimes also other functions like customer success, or if you're on a larger org, a strategy team. And basically the crux of the job is, say you work at a company that makes software for a bank. Product marketing is your customers are these financial institutions. So as a product manager, you're responsible for really deeply understanding what that bank customer is like, what they need, how they discover software solutions, how they buy them, figure out the positioning of your company's particular product, which positioning is just how you're different from other products, and then the messaging. Craft the messaging, which is everything from a catchy one-liner describing the product to pitch decks that the salespeople will use to copy that marketing managers will put on a website for the product. And then lastly, you figure out the go-to-market strategy, which just means, are we promoting the product on social media? Are we making a billboard? Are we reaching out to magazines? I don't know, that was a really random example. So product marketing really is a lot of different things, but at the core, you're trying to answer three questions. Who is the product for? What value does it provide? And how do we as an organization communicate that value? So the interesting thing about product marketing is that it looks really different at a lot of different orgs, and you'll often find people who are basically doing the product marketing role without having that job title, which is kind of what I did in one of my previous jobs, which has helped me to both get this role and be able to ramp up quickly in it. And the other thing I noticed is that typically at startups, product marketing managers will have an even wider mandate. So a lot of the time, they're not just writing down the positioning and the messaging and enabling sales or marketing. They might also be the ones out there putting out a go-to-market strategy, like working with a social media team or even crafting some of those posts themselves. So they're more hands-on. The other thing about product marketing to know is that there's a big difference between B2B versus B2C product marketing. So it depends on whether your company is making software for other companies or software directly to consumers. If you're confused about B2B versus B2C, good examples of B2B companies are something like Salesforce or Microsoft, where they make software used by other companies, versus Duolingo is a classic example of a B2C company, which makes software directly to consumers. And the reason that the product marketing role is different between these two types of organizations is that in B2B sales, there are so many steps between a product being developed to the product getting to the end user. So you have marketing, you have sales, and because your customer is a business, you might have 10 different people who have to approve that sale, implement the software across thousands of people, and then get people to actually adopt and use that software. Versus a B2C company like Duolingo, you develop that product, you market it to consumers, and you don't really have salespeople because that customer is just one person. It's not like 100 people at a company. And because of that, you find more product marketing roles at B2B companies because that sales cycle is so complicated. It's hard to deeply understand that end customer because you're understanding dozens of people, how the entire organization functions. And then you have to go back and tell marketing and sales at your own company what that customer is like and how to market to them. So I find that product marketing just adds more value as a role in that sense. And which is not to say that it doesn't add value in a B2C context, but what you'll often find is that product marketing and product managers have a way more similar role at B2C companies, and a lot of them will either combine the role or do away with one of them. A great example of this is Airbnb. I think 2 years ago, they got rid of the product manager role, and now they just have a product marketing role that kind of combines the two. So just an important note if you want to work in product marketing. In terms of my thoughts on the role, I think it is great for people who have experience in tech or startups across different areas, because you need to work with product, you need to work with sales, marketing, think about strategy, think about marketing. And so because I worked in a lot of those functions like product, sales, operations, it's really helped me ramp up in the role because I already know how those functions work, how they think. And honestly, the bigger learning gap for me has been moving from B2C to a B2B company, where it's much harder to intuitively understand how a big corporation works, how stakeholders within it think. But that's what makes it much more interesting, and you're able to add a lot of value if you really go in and interview those customers, understand how they think, and be able to translate that into messaging, because it is not obvious to people. Whereas at a B2C company like Duolingo, everyone is the end customer, so everyone has an opinion, everyone has their own understanding of that customer. So I work remotely, and normally I work at home because I have a lot of calls, but this morning I'm actually gonna go work at a coffee shop because my cleaner is here and I want to give her a little bit of space. I am not a big spender in general, and you'll never catch me spending thousands of dollars on a bag, but I will pay for cleaning because it's something that I hate doing. It saves me so much time, and it allows me to leverage my energy to do other things like make this video. This week, I have been really focused on doing customer interviews. So in my role, an important thing we do to get that deep customer understanding that I talked about is interview customers for new products that we're launching. This is a really multi-step process that involves hour-long interviews, surveys, listening to past sales calls, doing research, and basically building out a huge deck for each one of our customers, which is obviously another business, and not to share too many details for obvious reasons, but I'll build out a deck that contains persona insights and analyses captured from all of these different sources to help the sales and marketing organizations within my company really understand who they are talking to, who they are marketing to, and make sure they really hit exactly what the customer needs, how they think, and at the right stage of the buying process. So this morning, I'm going to do a little bit of deep work and writing to put together that deck that's due at the end of the week. In the afternoon, I actually have 2 more customer interviews, so I'll tell you more about those. So the lighting's really bad in here, and I still need to replace my wide angle lens, which I lost. But I have 15 minutes before my team stand-up. We do this every day just to catch up on what everyone is working on and see if anyone has blockers or questions for the head of product marketing. So I'm making a quick lunch, making this I had stuff left over from making pizza, so I'm making like a tortilla pizza situation. Or put a little more cheese on it. But I have stand-up and then I have my customer interviews. So I spent the morning just writing up my notes from other interviews this past week, figuring out what key insights were, and starting to put together a deck on the customer profiles, which I told you a little bit about. Turkey pepperonis. And then I also spent some time preparing for customer interviews. So in these interviews, the goal is just to get a really, really deep understanding of what my customer is like, what her job looks like on a day-to-day basis, and how does she think about purchasing software, making decisions, what does success look like for her, and basically knowing all the details to be able to paint a picture for other people across my organization, figure out how best to market to her, what kind of language to use in pitch decks, in campaigns, websites, blog posts. And yeah, the way I usually like to do it is to prepare questions based on the person's background, but really keeping things open-ended, like what do you do for work, how long have you been there. Sorry, I really can't do 2 things at the same time. And that the really open-ended questions like, what do you like about the software? What problems do you run into? And then I'll just start with general questions and see how the conversation evolves and what directions to take it in. So I just realized that earlier I wasn't using the mic, so hopefully you could still hear that and the sound wasn't too bad. As you can see, I have migrated to the couch. This ended up being kind of a busy afternoon because customer interviews I just feel like take up a lot of time because I have to be fully on during the interview, but they're just always so helpful for understanding things and learning things that I don't know, because when your customer is a business, it's just so complex and the way that they're organized is so different between different companies, different industries, and sometimes you just really don't know until you talk to someone who works there. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap up work in the next hour, and I usually don't do that much after work, but today I'm going with my boyfriend who works in finance to a little gala that his company is hosting. I'm really excited for that. It's just fun to dress up every once in a while and do something a little bit out of the 9-to-5 routine, because I feel like I do get very stuck into my routines. But before that, I wanted to talk a little bit about breaking into product marketing and interviewing and all of that. So you might remember that I first got my job at this company last year, but it was a strategy and ops role, not a product marketing role. But at the same time, when I was interviewing for jobs out of business school, I actually had another offer that was in product marketing. And the year before that, I had also gotten an internship in product marketing. Both of these were very well funded, established startups. Established startup, I don't know if that's kind of an oxymoron, but just later stage startups, I guess. And as you might expect, based on what we've talked about, because product marketing is a cross-section across strategy, product marketing, the interviews are really all over the place. Like, there isn't one set formula for what a product marketing interview looks like, but typically you have to be able to articulate how your past experience has touched upon understanding customers, being able to write and communicate clearly, because that feeds into building out positioning, messaging, speaking to different stakeholders, and working cross-functionally with sales, marketing, product, etc. So those are probably the most important behavioral aspects in your past role. Usually interviews will also be several rounds, including a more hands-on assignment where they might ask you to write something like a blog post to show that you can write in the voice of the company and the customer, or put together a presentation for a go-to-market strategy. So one of the startups that I interviewed at asked me to put together a short deck on how I would take the company's product, which was like an AI SaaS tool, to a completely new industry that they hadn't launched in. And it involved everything on how I would size the market, how I would target the different customers, and what channels I would use to launch the product. So there are a lot of great resources online for product marketing. I think Product Marketing Alliance is a really good one. And if you just search product marketing on LinkedIn, there are a lot of great people to follow. Anyway, I hope all of this was helpful and help you understand a little bit about the product marketing role and what I do in a day.